Wave, audience members.
Hello.
Wave, audience members. Wee, Princess Wave. Okay. All right. This is my tribute speech to my grandfather. Think back to your childhood. Do you remember that one person in your life that stood up for you? The one person you could go to no matter what? For me, the one person I could always count on to be on my side was my grandfather. My grandparents raised me after my parents divorced. Mom took off, went who knows where, and my dad had a really violent temper, so he wasn't really fit to raise me either. Because I lived with my paternal grandparents, I became extremely close to my grandfather. He meant the world to me. His presence made me feel safe and wanted, protected. When he was around, I wasn't afraid of Dad's temper at all. As a child, Grandpa seemed larger than life. He was my protector, my advocate, my sure and calming influence in the otherwise chaotic childhood. As a kid, I loved comic books. To me, Grandpa was just like one of the superheroes in the comics. He was tall and silent and oozed authority and fearlessness. He was my very own Batman. He would be there to fight off all the bad people, no matter what. And whenever Dad would get out of hand with his temper, Grandpa would say, "Joe Jr., knock it off." And he would. I looked up to Grandpa. He literally, to me as a kid, seemed as tall as a tree. He was about 6 foot tall and really slender, dark-haired, dark-eyed. He didn't talk too much. But I know that he fought in Germany in World War II against the Nazis. My most prized possessions of him was a picture he had taken in his uniform that was 15 years to the day before I was born. The other thing was the flag that draped his coffin at his funeral. Grandpa may have been the strong, silent type, but he wasn't afraid to voice his opinion when needed. When I felt like the whole world was against me, I could always count on Grandpa to stand up for me. When I was 14, a guy asked me out. Grandmom and Dad had a fit and said no. My grandfather said, "Oh, Joe Jr., let the child go on a date." I got to go on a date. He encouraged me in small and simple ways as well. One time I decided I wanted to learn square dancing with my friends at school. So every Saturday morning, he'd get up nice and early and take me over to where we would learn square dancing. He'd mumble and fuss the whole way, but he would do it anyway. While he could certainly stand up for me, he didn't let me get away with anything either. Like whenever I would start to get out of hand, he always have to say, "Mary Josephine Eyler." That was it. I stopped whatever it was I was doing. Grandpa was always there, day in and day out. He never changed. This was something I so desperately needed in the chaos of my life. He was as constant as the sunrise each morning, and when cancer took him when I was 15, I was devastated. My world had come to an end. When he was alive, just being in the same room with him was calming for me. We would just sit there and watch TV. Later on, I'd sit there and listen to him talk to his buddies on his CB radio. KEX 3898, those were his call letters. He taught me to fight for what I believe in and to not give up, but to also let go of what wasn't important. I don't always remember that lesson, but I do try to keep it in the back of my mind. When he died, there was no one there for me. I didn't even know that he was that ill. The last time I saw him, he was wearing some oxygen and watching a football game in the hospital bed, fussing about being there. He passed away on Halloween when I was at school. I didn't even know he died until I came home from school. There's so much I could say about Grandpa and how important he was for me. He took on the roles of protector and advocate. He was the calm center in the midst of a chaotic storm of my childhood. Unfortunately, my memories of Grandpa are fading with time, but when I look back on who was there for me in small and quiet ways and even in deep commanding tones, I always think of Grandpa, my very own superhero, my very own Batman.